Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome to a new video. So today we are looking at our top 10 picks for the Explorer and Pioneer cards from Wilds of Eldraine. So we now have the full spoiler for Wilds. It came out just earlier in the day that I'm recording this, although this will probably be up at the weekend. And it looks like an interesting set. I would say probably kind of mid power level. There's some interesting cards which may have an impact, but I don't think it's going to kind of upend the format or formats in any given way. But let's see what happens. There are some good cards that I think we're going to talk about today. I will probably miss some, so do always let me know in the comments what you think. Are there any that I'm missing? Are there any you think I've kind of got wrong? Yeah, get a bit of a discussion going, which is always interesting. So we'll start, as we always do in these videos, with some honourable mentions. So these are cards which I'm interested to see played, but not necessarily reaching the top 10. So we've got Kellen the Fey-Blooded. So this is a creature with an adventure. So the creature is a 2/2 with double strike for 3, where other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to it. And it also has Birthright Boon, 1 and a white sorcery adventure. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So that essentially does the same thing as Open the Armory. So the reason this is here is that I think if a deck like Hammer Time or Boros Equipment becomes good in the format, I think then this is something that we'll definitely see play. We don't have Open the Armory in Explorer at this point, so it'll be interesting to see if that can kind of fill a niche in that format. A good card. It's not quite kind of there in terms of the archetype, but it'll be interesting to see if it can make an impact. Then the next one is Farsight Ritual. So that's 4 mana for an instant. It has Bargain, which says you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. If the spell was bargained, look at the top 8 cards of your library instead. Put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the first bit of that is simply the kind of the non-flashback memory deluge, which is a decent kind of draw spell. But if you can bargain it, and I'm working under the assumption that given the kind of number of tokens and things that kind of fly around these formats, that it's not going to be too hard to kind of reliably get bargain off when you need it to. Then you are looking at 8 cards, so it's actually better than Dig Through Time and a flashback memory deluge. So I think there's something there. I'm not sure if it'll replace either of those cards, but certainly having another effect of that kind is never a bad thing. Then we've also got Mosswood Dread Knight, which is a 2 mana 3/2 with trample. When it dies, you may cast it from your graveyard as an adventure until the end of your next turn. And Dread Whispers, 1 and a black for a sorcery. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. So neither side of this is kind of like particularly exciting, but when you smash them together and you have the ability to kind of constantly recur the Mosswood Dread Knight as a draw spell and then play the creature again, I think there is something to that. It'll be interesting to see, given that Golgari decks keep threatening to be good in the format but never quite get there, whether this can make a difference there. Interested to play that one for sure. Stroke of Midnight is our next one. White instant for 3 mana. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. So this is a very efficient removal spell in white, which often doesn't get kind of removal that's quite this good. It's often conditional, exile it whilst this enchantment's on the battlefield, that kind of thing. So to destroy any non-land permanent at instant speed for 3 mana is pretty good. Yes, the opponent does get a 1/1 white human, but that's hardly the most difficult creature to deal with. The Generous Gift, I think, is the kind of green version of this, and that gives them a 3/3. So there is something to this being quite a powerful removal spell. We've also got Godric, Cloaked Reveler. So he is a 3/3 with haste for 3 mana. Also has Celebration, as long as 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn. Godric, Cloaked Reveler is a dragon with base power 4/4, power and toughness 4/4, flying, and the fire breathing effect. So for all dragons. So red dragons you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So red, Boros, those kind of colours, not very difficult to get 2 or more non-land permanents under your control. Fable of the Mirror Breaker does it without just by existing. So there is something to that. So I think this will often reliably be a dragon. And then if you are kind of playing this and getting to attack with a 4/4 haste straight away. I think that is very, very good. And then the final one of our honourable mentions is Blossoming Tortoise. So that is a 3/3 for 4 in green, creature turtle. And whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, mill 3 cards, then return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activated abilities of lands you control cost 1 less to activate. Land creatures you control get +1/+1. So, it does a bit of everything. This is a ramp spell sometimes. The land creature pump ability is marginal, might be quite good given that the kind of Dungeons and Dragons creature lands are pretty good in the format. It's that middle ability that I'm most interested in, not because I could see an obvious way to break it, but reducing the activated cost of activated abilities of your lands could be a powerful thing. Thespian stages only needing 1, various other abilities, those kind of filter lands which allow you to add 1 mana of any color by paying 1. Suddenly that's free. There's an interesting kind of synergy there with quite a lot of powerful lands. So I'd be interested to see if anyone can break this. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody did. I can't see an obvious way to do it at this point in the format. Probably in older formats it might be easier, but certainly one to keep an eye on in that sense. So moving on to our main list of top 10 now. So we're starting with Imadane's Recruiter, which is another adventure card. There's quite a few adventures flying around this because it is always a very powerful mechanic to get that kind of 2-for-1 on a single card. So this is a 3 mana 2/2 uncommon human knight. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. And it has a sorcery adventure for 5, create 2 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance. So I am specifically thinking about Explorer for this card, and the kind of Boros Convoke decks, which kind of use that go wide and then pump all of your creatures. Pioneer does have Reckless Bushwhacker, which is just better. So I don't think this is going to replace that card by any means, but it is the right colours for Boros Convoke and Explorer, and having that kind of versatility as well. It's good in the mid game. It kind of fulfills that Reckless Bushwhacker kind of role. Yes, it is more mana, but also if you draw it in the late game, you are able to potentially create 2/2/2s, play another 2/2, attack for 9. There is kind of something about on a stalled board where both players are just top decking. You've got lots of land. Suddenly being able to do a lot out of nowhere. So that it doesn't curve from its spell into its creature like the most powerful adventures like Bone Crusher Giant, but it does exist more as kind of 2 separate spells which are kind of good at different points in the game. So I will probably try this one in a Boros Convoke style deck and see if it can fulfill that kind of bushwhacker role. Number 9, we have Sleight of Hand. So this is a reprint for the first time in 9th edition, since 9th edition, so it is new to Explorer and Pioneer. It's a 1 mana sorcery in blue, and it says look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. So it's essentially another 1 mana cantrip to sit alongside Opt and Consider. So decks like Izzet Phoenix and other kind of decks which rely on casting a lot of cheap spells now have 12 cantrips to choose from. You can play up to 12 cantrips rather from the 3 different options. This one is at sorcery speed, so Consider and Opt are probably slightly better, but when you're thinking about a deck like Izzet Phoenix, generally you are wanting to do this often on your first main phase. So the fact that it's a sorcery isn't too much of a drawback, and also allowing you to kind of pick 1 from the top 2 rather than kind of having to look at 1 and then make a judgment as to whether it should go in the graveyard, like with Consider. I think there is a powerful effect there. So I think this will go into at least some decks because 1 mana blue spells which let you filter and then draw a card are usually pretty good. Number 8, one of my personal favourites from the set. I'm not sure how good it's necessarily going to be, but I'd like it to be, so that's why it's on the list. And that is Rankle's Prank, or Rankle's Prankle, if you like. So that is a 4 mana sorcery in black. It says choose 1 or more. Each player discards 2 cards. Each player loses 4 life. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So that's kind of the kind of Rankle's, the original Rankle's dealing combat damage effect, kind of just blown up to be more powerful in a kind of single spell. This is an incredibly versatile sorcery. It can be used in whatever mode you want to kind of massively disadvantage the opponent. If they only have 2 cards in hand, if they only have 2 creatures and you've got lots, or it's just you can kind of modulate it in the way which is most useful at any given time. And the fact that you can just make your opponent lose 4 life will often just win the game out of nowhere, or wrath the opponent's board if they only have 2 creatures and you're playing a control style deck. So a 4 mana sorcery is expensive, but I think you have to think of this as a card which can cause massive sort of game swings. You would happily pay 4 mana for a board wipe in black, and this will often kind of fulfill that function. It'll strip cards out the opponent's hand, and sometimes it will just end the game by itself. So we'll see. I'm kind of marginal on this one, but I really like the design. That kind of mirror effect that affects both you and your opponent, and kind of choosing the right time to play it, I think is really interesting game design. So hopefully this card will be good. At number 7, we have Royal Treatment. So this is a simple 1 mana spell in green that's an instant. Target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. Create a Royal Roll token attached to that creature. So it essentially gives the creature +1/+1 and ward 1. So this is, in many ways, essentially the green version of Slip Out the Back, but with added ward 1. Now, it is slightly different in that Slip Out the Back does cause the creature to phase out, which does kind of save it from wraths, but most of the time this will fulfill the same kind of function. So if you do need to save a particular creature, you're kind of running those Voltron battlecruiser style decks where, maybe it's something like auras where you're just stacking lots of different enchantments on a single creature, then something like this that's easy to leave up mana for is very good. And most of the time, it will kind of just deal with targeted removal and act as a 1 mana counter spell, and also adds a little bit of further advantage in that your opponent's spells, which they then might try and use against the creature, also cost 1 more. So maybe mainly a sideboard card, but I do like it, and I think it will show up in some decks in the sideboard. And then we have the End, so that is 2 and 2 black for an instant that costs 2 less to cast if your life total is 5 or less, so black, black. And it says exile target creature or planeswalker, search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that permanent and exile them. That player shuffles, then draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. So I think normally you'd kind of look to pay 3 mana for this effect in a format like Pioneer or Explorer. So often this will be cheaper, sometimes it'll be more expensive, but it is unlike a lot of other removal spells in that this is very clean removal. Exile a creature or planeswalker, it doesn't matter if it has indestructible or whatever, and it deals with all copies of that card. So when you're thinking about kind of the big, powerful creatures in the format, Shieldred, Atraxa, Greasefang, one of the main problems is that you kill one and then the opponent just gets another one out of the library, or whatever. So being able to just remove all spells of that, all cards of that name, I think is very good. It may mostly be a sideboard option, but I think this is very good. You can imagine a scenario where the opponent kind of plays a Greasefang, and then you're able to get rid of it and kind of just neuter their entire deck. So there is something to that, definitely. So, moving into our top 5 now, we have Sir Ginger, the Meal Ender, which is one of my favourite cards from the set. So this is a legendary artifact creature that's a food knight. It's a 3/1 for 2. And it has trample, hexproof, and haste as long as the opponent controls a planeswalker. And whenever another artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it and scry 1. And you can pay 2 and tap to sacrifice it and gain life equal to its power. So wall of text card, but one of the best top-down designs I think I've seen in a very long time. Just this character from the first Eldraine trailer, just kind of coming back and actually having a card, and yeah, she's great. So this is one of the most interesting anti-planeswalker cards ever printed, and there are a lot of planeswalkers that run around in Pioneer and Explorer. Teferis, Wandering Emperors. Or whatever it may be, and I think this will see a great deal of play, potentially in the sideboard, but kind of in those kind of artifact style decks, in the kind of as anti planeswalker tech. You can imagine a situation where you're attacking an opponent. They try and play the Wandering Emperor. and all of a sudden this has hexproof, and so they can't target it with the Wandering Emperor's ability. So there's kind of some interesting interactions there, and that second ability, whenever another artifact you control is put into the graveyard, this is a format that has a lot of blood, it has a lot of treasure. There are constantly artifacts going to the graveyard. I mean, there's no this ability triggers only once a turn clause on this, so in a single turn, you could potentially be putting 3, 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and scrying lots. So it's wonderful flavor. It's an all-round home run, and I think actually a really good card. So I'm super excited to see where this might see play. There's no immediate obvious home for it, which is why I think it might be something of a sideboard card initially. But if you are running an artifact style deck, I don't see why you wouldn't run this. That life gain is also can be really good. Potentially gaining 5-6 life with this card if you have a redundant copy in your hand. Sack it, gain 6 life, play another. It's just very good. At number 4, we have Lightless Looter. So this is a 2-mana 1/1 with flying, fairy shapeshifter. It says tap, draw a card, then discard a card, and you can pay X. Likeness Looter becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except it has flying and this ability, activate only as a sorcery. So 2-mana looters are always good. Think Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Merfolk Looter. These are very popular cards. They've been good at various points in various formats. So it's very good in the early game. It does have that looter effect, but is also a 1/1 flyer if you just need to chip in for some extra damage. And it's good in the late game, copying the best creature in your graveyard, except it does make it better because it gives it flying as well. So you can imagine a flying Shieldred or something like that, a flying Hullbreaker Horror, whatever you want, really. Just a very, very powerful card. It's probably a strict upgrade to Lazav the Multifarious. That is a 1/3, but I think having flying and also kind of acting as a looter in the early game if you need it to be. Really good card. Interested to see if it sees play anywhere. Dimir is a kind of color combination that keeps threatening to be good. Dimir rogues, and sadly this isn't a rogue, but there are a lot of interesting kind of fairy cards in this deck in these colors, and it'll be interesting to see if kind of Dimir fairies can make a splash in the format as well. Number 3, we have Weirfox Bodyguard. So that is a 2/2 for 3 mana in white, Elf Fox Knight. It has flash, and when it enters the battlefield, exile up to one other target non-fox creature until it leaves the battlefield, and you can pay 1 and a white to sacrifice it to gain 2 life. So this is this kind of brutal Cathar style effect, a 2/2 for 3 that exiles a creature when it enters the battlefield. This is often better than that. The flash makes it possible to respond to other game actions or to pump spells and really blow your opponent out, which Brutal Cathar doesn't have. Yes, Brutal Cathar is a human, so that does give that particular card an advantage. But Werefox Bodyguard is a very versatile removal spell, and it has incidental life gain that can be handy. If you've used it to get rid of a Fable of the Mirror Breaker token, and there's no kind of danger of it coming back, then if you need to at some point sacrifice this to gain 2 life, it's not a huge amount of life, but it could make a difference. Really good card. Interested to see if it can replace Brutal Cathar in any decks that might want to play something like that. At number 2, we have Moonshaker Cavalry. So this is 8 mana, 5 and 3 white, for a 6/6 Spirit Knight with flying. When it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain flying and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So this is essentially Craterhoof Behemoth in white. It does a very similar effect. It costs the same amount of mana. It gives them flying instead of haste and trample. So it is a different kind of evasion. And obviously it doesn't get haste itself. So unlike Craterhoof, it can't also attack. So there are some differences between the cards, but this is the first of this kind of effect in Explorer and Pioneer. Craterhoof isn't in these formats. So I think this will see play. white is not necessarily the most natural color for this. Green is your kind of more natural ramp color for Crater Hoof, in kind of elf decks and that kind of thing. And also the ability to kind of tutor up any creature you like is often found more in green. But I genuinely think this is a very, very good card. I can imagine playing it in a kind of white devotion style deck, 1 or 2 copies, where you kind of have Nykthos to generate lots of mana. You might even have an Elish Norn, which doubles up the enter the battlefield effect. So it's almost certainly a game ender whenever you play it. But it's just kind of trying to find the right shell. I'm sure that someone will be able to find one at some point. And it is one of the most exciting and kind of reads as the most kind of has one of the highest raw power levels in the format. So yeah, exciting card. Let's see what happens with that. And finally, at number 1, I don't think there's any kind of surprise about this. This is an interesting card, I think I'll put it that way. Beseech the Mirror is a 4-mana sorcery in black. It has Bargain, and it says, search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If the spell was bargained, you may cast the exile card without paying its mana cost if that spell's mana value is 4 or less. Put the exile card into your hand if it wasn't cast this way. I think bargain is a relatively simple mechanic to enable, as I said earlier. We are in a world of blood tokens, treasure tokens, all of the rest of it, kind of incidental artifacts and enchantments. You think about Rakdos midrange, that's, it's blood tithe harvesters always. They come with a blood token. Your Fable tokens are generating treasures, and this essentially acts as 4 more copies of whatever card you need in an archetype like that. Almost all of your spells in Pioneer are 4 mana or less, most of the good ones. So this is generally just immediately tutoring up whatever card you need and putting it into play. So that could be a Shieldred, that could be a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Whatever you want, this is it. And someone will break this card. It's only a matter of time. So that's why it's number 1. It reads incredibly powerfully. It will play incredibly powerfully. The ability to just tutor up any card you like is very good. And then just play it for 4 mana or less. If it is 4 mana or less, there's a lot to this. And it's only a matter of time before somebody makes this card very, very good. And I'm excited to play with it myself, see where it kind of slots in. Obviously, you do have to kind of give up space for it, but if your deck suddenly is able to have essentially what is 6 Shieldreds, then good luck to your opponent. So that is Beseech the Mirror, and that is our number 1 card for Wilds of Eldraine for Pioneer and Explorer. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video. Try and get these out early, just have my initial thoughts. I'm sure other people will kind of come up with different lists and, with more time to kind of digest the entire spoiler season, but I wanted to kind of post my initial reaction to the set, which, as I say, I think is kind of powerful, but without being overly powerful. And yeah, a lot of interesting mechanics and cards. And I think a lot will depend on how mechanics like Bargain kind of play in reality. So let's wait and see. Exciting times. So thank you for watching, and I will see you for the next time.